welcome to the Acid Trash Jamboree and to the first episode of the new year. Up for discussion today is a rather nice little compilation by the artist known as Nil by Nose and a whole slew of remixers. Now, Nil by Nose, real name Carl Anderson, is something of an underground veteran. I was first introduced to his work via Pump Records' long-running Godspunk comp series, which I did a special feature video on a few months back. Yeah, Carl has pretty much appeared on every one of these, either as part of groups like the Las Vegas Mermaids, or on his own as Nil by Nose. So yeah, over the years, I've become acquainted with hours worth of his stuff, and there's plenty to enjoy there. This pro-made CDR, Pictures on Trains Repainted, is the first thing of his outside of Godspunk that I've heard. Released in 2024 by the US label Love Earth Music, part of this collection originally came out a couple of years before as a 10-inch lathe cut, with each short track intended as a soundtrack to the videos that Carl would make of graffitied trains. For the repainted edition, he invited a whole load of different underground talents to remix the tracks. So yeah, what we get here is a combination of pieces from the original 10-inch, interspersed with said reimaginings. And yeah, in spite of it featuring no less than 17 different collaborators, Pictures on Trains mostly flows really nicely as an album experience, an audio train ride if you will, with just a couple of unexpected detours along the way and thankfully very few delays. Yeah, kicking off with the gorgeous, chilled ambient fragment Buffed Graph, this flows seamlessly into Brian Combs' equally lovely, glitched and stretched reworking. Following a clutch of mostly very laid-back, beat-driven tracks, we then get the first of said sonic curveballs, courtesy of the podcaster China Lake, also known as Spidered News, who rattles off a bulletin in his irreverent style over pulsing, brooding electronics. The music gets more and more fuzzed out and disturbed as the track progresses, occasionally drowning out the voiceover in the process, eventually sputtering out into a buzzing drone. The moody, urban electro of Carl's Train Graph gets us back on track for a minute or so, before notorious noise prankster Awkward Geisha hops aboard and sets the controls for the heart of some derelict hellscape or other, as metallic beats pound relentlessly against a piercing, White House-style feedback tone. In sharp contrast, the Aphex Twin-esque, liminal synth spookery of Ghosts of Train Graffiti Past brings the volume down considerably, drifting straight into an equally haunted remix, courtesy of Dolly Ray Starcore, whose assorted glitches and echoes take us even further into some strange, dreamlike space, eventually snapping us out of our sleepy reverie with a disturbing climax of distortion. Things then float along nicely for a while with Adam Fellman's lo-fi IDM offering Unfettered Train Rage, providing a midpoint highlight, reminding me slightly of the 90s work by David Christian or The Black Dog maybe. Equally enjoyable is the piece from Fjord, a German duo also known as Fjord Noise Band, who chip in with 4 minutes of suitably cacophonous shenanigans, coating Carl's dubby bass lines and snare hits, with layers of queasy static and mechanical grinding sounds, until there's barely a trace of source material left to hear under the sonic pile-up. By the time we get to the second half of the disc, the overall vibe changes for a while. Yeah, following Ninit's drum and bass overhaul of the reverb-heavy Gloomscape 4-colour panels, we come to an extended stretch of melancholic twilight ambience, the chilly, out-of-focus electronics and muffled, distant beats, building effectively on the mysterious, introspective aphexisms from earlier. Then, as we hit the home straight, the neon-lit synthwave of Carl's second Hove Station piece is stretched and smeared into New Age oblivion by the remixer known as Auroch, followed by the tense beat minimalism of First Capital Connect Full Colour Runner. This propulsive, cluster-styled creation is then given a makeover, courtesy of the delightfully monikered Matt Upchuck, who adds deep rumbles of bass, droning fuzz guitar, and menacing, throaty rasps. The whole thing coming over like something you'd find on an obscure post-punk or industrial tape back in the 80s. And speaking of said scene, track 30 is by none other than the legendary Howlin' the Typewriter, also known as Stan from the aforementioned Pump Records, who gives a curious techno meets arcade game soundtrack treatment to Carl's Sonics. As the musical train pulls into its last few station stops, our senses are then overwhelmed by the colourful and vibrant electronica of Cardiff's Yeti project. And finally, a contribution from the human Ariel, who feeds Carl's beats and sampled tannoy vocals through all manner of squelchy, noisy FX madness. So, just to reiterate, far from being a grab bag of disparate elements, Pictures on Trains Repainted works well as a front-to-back listening experience, taking you on quite the journey. Carl has said that he never really intended for these small, individual soundtrack pieces to ever be collected together, considering them almost throwaway at first. And yeah, I guess some of them are a bit blink and you'll miss them, very much acting as the bits between the bits, to quote Osric Tentacles. But don't forget, without them, we wouldn't have the remix material, so throwaway or not, they more than serve their purpose. Yeah, overall, this comes highly recommended, mixing up myriad electronic styles from across the decades into a delightful sonic tapestry. Okay, so that just about does it for today. If you're at all intrigued, please do search out the album on Bandcamp and give it a listen. I'll no doubt be back before long with more of the usual fun and frolics, but in the meanwhile, if you haven't done so yet, please hit subscribe to keep fully up to date with the channel's activity, and feel free to check out the archive too. Thanks as ever for watching, and I'll catch you again soon on the Acid Trash Jamboree.